The crowd gathers, their faces a mix of sorrow and morbid curiosity. All eyes are fixed on the central plaza, a stage set for a public spectacle. The scribes are already at work, their quills scratching furiously. To document every single moment of the coming event, heavy chains are brought out, a symbol of absolute control. The official record is being written, a story with a predetermined ending. From the prisoner's perspective, the world is a blur of faces and the stage of his demise. The chains are pulled tight, a cold and final restraint. A lone figure is dragged up the steps, his spirit seemingly broken. They announce that these chains are special, designed to seal away his powers completely. He's accused of wielding a demon's power, but all he sees are the faces of those he failed. He's dragged before the faceless mob, the very people he's being condemned for. He screams out in desperation, demanding to know what he did wrong. From a nearby rooftop, a well-dressed man begins to speak, turning the crowd against him. He holds a strange, glowing orb, a smug smile on his face. The man's words hit their mark, asking if our boy ever truly understood the people's pain. Or perhaps, the accuser continues, there was another reason for his actions. But in a sudden burst of raw power, the special chains shatter completely. The explosive force sends him flying backward across the stage. He tumbles off the platform, vanishing from sight as the guillotine waits silently. The accuser's words still linger as he lands hard on the wooden planks. He looks up, not with rage, but with crushing self-doubt, wondering if it's because he did nothing. From the stage, a familiar figure looks back, his expression cold and distant. And our boy whispers his name in disbelief. His own brother, Arthur. A memory surfaces of a time-long past, kneeling before that same man. He remembers pleading his case, and we finally learn his name is Mordred. He can still see the look of disappointment in his brother's eyes. Arthur's words from that day echo in his mind. You don't understand people's hearts. And in the present, his brother turns away, offering no comfort, no reprieve. As they drag him back toward the guillotine, Mordred finally begins to understand. He remembers being pushed around, being told that getting hurt was just part of the game, all with a cruel, smiling face. And now he understands just how agonizing that pain truly is. But it's a lesson that no one ever bothered to teach him, only that he should listen to those in power, and everything would be fine. A memory of betrayal, of being cast aside without a second thought. As his life flashes before his eyes, a single thought takes hold. With his head locked in place, he stares into the void. If only he could have one more chance to do it all over again. But the executioner's words confirm this is the end of his story. He's asked if he has any final words to leave behind, but Mordred has nothing left to offer. Just a quiet acceptance of his fate. The rope is cut, and the blade comes rushing down. A swift and merciless end for the condemned man. The crowd gasps, reading the official story as it unfolds. His final thought wasn't of regret, but of how much it would hurt. And then he jolts awake with a scream, his body trembling. He's not on an execution stage, but on the floor of a lavish room. The guillotine is gone, and somehow his life has been reset. He can only mutter a single word of confusion. He's back in his childhood room looking much, much younger. He touches his chest, the realization dawning on him. He's alive. But the memories of the revolution are still vivid. The chaos and the plundering of their home. He looks out the window at the castle he remembers being burned to the ground. Overwhelmed, he collapses to the floor, trying to catch his breath. He recalls losing everything in what felt like a terrible, vivid dream. Suddenly, a group of maids enters, greeting him with cheerful smiles. But they don't call him Mordred, they call him Arthur. And when they announce that breakfast is ready, his eyes light up with pure delight. He thinks back to the prison food from his dream, a watery soup and stale bread. The sudden silence in the hall brings him back to the present moment. Clearing his throat, he tries to dismiss the execution as just a strange nightmare. He looks up at a portrait of his brother, certain that someone like Arthur would never be executed. A wave of joy washes over him as he imagines the brilliant life he's meant to lead. His strange behavior, talking to a portrait, leaves the maids completely baffled. They can only exchange worried glances, unsure what to make of his outburst. Because after all, he is Arthur, a name that commands respect and ensures his safety. He recalls a lesson from his youth, being told to never even look at the commoners. The maids call out to him again, pulling him from his memories. The staff seems to be in a panic over something. A flustered chef explains that a delayed delivery means there's no bread for breakfast. But Arthur suddenly has a brilliant idea, much to the maids' surprise. He cheerfully suggests that if there's no bread, they should just eat cake instead. He seems incredibly proud of his simple, elegant solution. This is the life he was meant to live, where everything goes his way. This, he believes, is his new, wonderful reality. But behind his back, The maids begin to whisper among themselves. They're talking about his strange outburst from earlier, specifically his tone-deaf suggestion to just eat cake. Their whispers follow him, a stark reminder that royalty is different and not in a good way. Overwhelmed, he quickly dismisses them, announcing his return to his room. He then turns and flees through the garden, leaving the staff calling after him. The maids can only watch him go, one of them now certain she wasn't imagining his strange behavior. He reaches the safety of his chambers and slams the doors shut. This was supposed to be a blessed life, a perfect dream he could finally live. So he slides to the floor, desperately asking himself why it's all going wrong. The answer lies in the vivid memories of his past life as Mordred. He doesn't understand why the feeling of that hellish existence still clings to him so strongly. Staring at his own hands, he's simply terrified. He reaches out as if trying to grasp onto this new fragile reality, but his eyes are wide with a terror he can't possibly explain. He squeezes them shut, trying to block out the haunting visions, but the darkness only pulls him deeper into the memories of his past life. He sees the uprising again, the commoners storming the gates with fire and steel, a tidal wave of fury that swept away everything he ever knew, and he remembers himself as Mordred, standing calmly amidst the chaos. He can still hear his name being called, a warning that came too late. He remembers being captured, screaming in defiance as they dragged him away, and he remembers the crushing despair of being abandoned by the one person he trusted. His old name echoes in his mind. Mordred. He remembers wondering why the revolution was even happening. He'd even suggested giving money to the commoners, a simple fix in his mind. But all he ever got in return was ridicule and pain. He can't help but ask his brother what any of it meant. He remembers the panic of discovering their fortune had vanished overnight, and Arthur's only response was to question what terrible things Mordred had done to cause it. No one had any answers, only excuses after everyone had already fled. He remembers pleading with his brother, completely broken. But Arthur's final judgment was that he would never change. He's pulled back into the memory of his imprisonment, of the constant, agonizing pain. He remembers gasping for breath on the cold stone floor. A guard would taunt him, asking if he finally understood the people's suffering, and they would leave him there, calling him by his brother's name, Arthur. He remembers the accuser's words, mocking him for the power he couldn't access. The weight of these memories sends him spiraling into a panic. He was thrown in a cell after the revolution, tormented day after day by the very people he once ruled. But he also remembers a mysterious girl who would visit his cell, tending to his wounds. She would kneel before him with a gentle smile and ask if he was in pain. And he knows with chilling certainty that this wasn't a dream. It was a memory. He grits his teeth, the horrifying truth finally sinking in. Just then a soft voice calls out his current name, Arthur. He's pulled back to the memory of the girl asking why he was on the floor, and now she stands before him, a maid with the same empty eyes asking if he's in pain. The same question she asked him in that cold, dark cell. He looks up in terror, recognizing her as the woman from the prison. The shocking realization hits him. She was one of his own maids all along. He instinctively backs away from her shadowy figure. But she simply looks down, her expression unreadable as she rejects his fear. Arthur screams at her to stay back, the past and present colliding in a wave of terror. He scrambles backward, his breath catching in his throat. In his haste, he knocks over a tray of tea. The hot liquid splashes all over the maid's uniform. Arthur immediately points a finger, shouting that it's all her fault. He tries to rationalize his outburst, claiming it was merely self-defense. But the maid simply holds up her hand, red from the scalding tea. Arthur freezes, the reality of his actions sinking in. He looks away, trying to deny any responsibility for her injury. His mind twists the situation, wondering why she's the one inflicting this pain on him. And for the first time, he sees a flicker of genuine suffering on her face. But instead of reacting to her own pain, the maid reaches out, asking if he's all right. Arthur can only stare back in stunned silence, completely bewildered. A look of sudden realization crosses her face. She tries to explain that her concern isn't just for him. He clutches his head, the woman from his memories resurfacing. The very same one who visited him in that cold, dark prison cell. The horrifying connection sends him spiraling into a full-blown panic. He's overwhelmed by the agonizing memories of his past life. He can't understand why they still haunt him now that he's supposed to be Arthur. He clutches his chest, confused by the phantom agony of a life he no longer lives. She looks at him with genuine concern, asking if he's the one in pain. Arthur is completely taken aback by her question. He tries to brush it off, insisting that he's perfectly fine. But then his focus shifts and he demands to see her injured hand. He gently takes it, a quiet apology finally escaping his lips. Looking at the burn, he acknowledges that it must be painful. He then announces that this is his special ability, and with a flash of light, he promises to heal her right now, a power he now understands to be healing magic. With the wound gone, he gives her a proud pat on the head, happy with his work. He asks her if the pain is gone, still acting quite pleased with himself. But she's completely flustered, insisting that he shouldn't use such a power on her. She explains that his magic is far too precious to be wasted on a common maid. The thought of Prince Arthur using his gift for her sake is simply too much to handle. Arthur just turns away, muttering that he was the one who surprised her. But she calls out to him again, her expression softening. He looks back, clutching his chest and admitting that looking at her makes his heart ache. Her face flushes red at his sudden and unexpected confession. Completely misinterpreting his words, she flees the room in a flustered panic. The door slams shut, leaving Arthur alone to wonder about that very noisy maid. He looks down at his hand, realizing this is the first time he's ever healed a commoner. His mind flashes back to a lesson from his youth, his tutor standing over him. The man had explained that his healing ability was an incredibly precious gift. He was told to think carefully about how to use it, a lesson he took with a smug grin. The tutor's question was less of a suggestion and more of a command. He was taught to only use his magic when instructed, a tool for those in power. Back in the present, he pulls a book from the shelf, the weight of that lesson still heavy. After all, that's simply what he was taught to do. He decides to report the incident with the maid to his tutor later on. But as he goes to place the book back, something unusual catches his eye. It's a worn, tattered book, unlike the others on the shelf. He realizes it's not a spell book, but some kind of personal notebook. Opening the first page, he sees that it's a diary from the year 21. But the first entry details a grim prophecy, a revolution, followed by the execution of Arthur Pendragon. The horrifying prediction mirrors his own traumatic memories. He lets out a scream, throwing the diary across the room in a panic. He can't comprehend such a twisted and morbid version of the future. A heavy silence fills the library as he stares at the discarded book. He tries to walk away to forget what he saw, but an undeniable curiosity forces him to turn back, his heart pounding. He frantically flips through the book, his hands trembling. The pages detail the success of the revolution and the capture of Prince Arthur. It even specifies the year of his death at the age of 20. With every page he turns, the sweat on his brow grows colder. He reads about the torture and the guillotine, letting out a horrified scream. He stands there, paralyzed by the confirmation of his darkest fears. Just then, an hourglass from a nearby shelf tips over and lands squarely on his head. The sudden impact seems to knock some sense into him. As the hourglass clatters to the floor, he finally accepts that this was never a dream. He clutches his head, the terrifying truth hitting him all at once. Time has actually been reversed. He realizes with dawning horror that this isn't just a story, but the fate that is destined to befall him. A future where he loses his head to the guillotine. He wonders if there's any way to avoid this terrible outcome. He snatches the diary back up, a desperate idea forming in his mind. He has to understand what's going on, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, the maids are still gossiping about the recent events. The whispers travel quickly through the castle halls. The maid Arthur healed is still in awe, recounting the story to anyone who will listen. And her tale eventually reaches the ears of a man named Goyoku, the prince's personal tutor. Goyoku listens with a smug grin, intrigued by the rumors surrounding Prince Arthur. He immediately confronts the maid, accusing her of using her body to seduce the young prince. She struggles against his grip, desperately denying the vile accusation. But the tutor's authority is absolute, leaving the other maids to watch in silent terror. They can only whisper among themselves, powerless to intervene. Goyoku reminds them all that defying the nobility is an unforgivable offense. The maid remembers being pressured to take advantage of the prince, a thought she found repulsive. But just then, Arthur himself bursts in, demanding to know what's being said about him. His sudden arrival sends a fresh wave of panic through the onlooking staff. Goyoku's expression shifts from surprise to a look of cunning realization. The maid calls out his name, completely caught off guard by his sudden appearance. Goyoku quickly tries to smooth things over, claiming it was all just a small matter. But Arthur explains that he was simply scolding the maid for her earlier behavior. He tells her not to worry, that he understands the situation perfectly. Seeing his chance to escape, Goyoku tries to excuse himself from the conversation. But Arthur stops him in his tracks, calling out his name with a new authority. He then announces to everyone that he's a changed man, feeling completely reborn. Intrigued, Goyoku asks if they can have a little chat in private. Arthur turns to face him, asking what business the tutor could possibly have with him. And with a sly look, Goyoku insists that everything he does is for Prince Arthur's sake. Arthur cheerfully explains that he wants to see the financial ledgers. Goyoku's face twists into a greedy smile, eagerly accepting the task. The tutor mutters that a prince should do some work, especially after being scolded by his fiancée. He seems to be plotting something, a bead of sweat rolling down his face. Goyoku feigns concern for Arthur's education, but the prince simply tells him not to worry. He then offers to reward the tutor for his hard work, much to Goyoku's surprise. Meanwhile, the maid recalls that the hand Arthur healed wasn't just burned, but covered in calluses. Arthur suddenly offers to heal the tutor's stiff shoulders, pushing him into a chair. The tutor can only grimace, thinking about how selfish the prince is. But Arthur's expression turns serious as he points out that nobles rarely get injured. Goyoku is left confused by the prince's words, while the maid watches thoughtfully from a distance. But Arthur suddenly recalls a memory of the countess that Goyoku once brought to him, a woman who had complained of a terrible pain in her hands. He asks his tutor what became of her, a thoughtful look on his face. He remembers being told to heal her quickly, as she was from a merchant family. A woman who spent her days counting money, much to his younger self's confusion. Goyoku starts to sweat, misinterpreting Arthur's quiet contemplation. But Arthur grabs his hand, pointing out that it looks quite painful. He notes the calluses in the exact same place as the countess's. The tutor falls silent, a bead of sweat rolling down his cheek. Goyoku lets out a nervous laugh, telling the prince he's being quite cruel. He then leans in, revealing that he also comes from a family of merchants. But Arthur's expression remains cold and calculating. His mind screams out a single damning word: liar. From the doorway, the maid scoffs at the pathetic display. Arthur then tells the tutor that all the money he counts every day belongs to him. The accusation hangs in the air, and the maids realize he's talking about embezzlement. They immediately understand they've overheard a very dangerous conversation. Arthur offers to heal the tutor's dishonorable wound, a sly smile on his face. He then demands that Goyoku hand over the financial ledgers right now. Goyoku looks up from the floor, asking why the prince is making such a face. Arthur stands over him, declaring this a new beginning for a prince who is no longer ignorant. He gives a confident, almost cruel smile, relishing his newfound power. The tutor can only stammer in terror about Prince Arthur's sudden growth. Arthur calmly states that he is truly happy to see this change. Defeated, Goyoku scurries away without another word. The maids immediately rush to Arthur's side, praising him for his brilliant performance. They can't believe the prince would argue with his tutor just for a maid's sake. But all the sudden praise leaves Arthur blushing and completely flustered. He tries to wave them off, insisting it was nothing special. He buries himself in the financial records, realizing just how much Goyoku has been skimming off the top. With a new sense of purpose, he tells the maids to keep up the good work and rushes off. The staff can only watch him go, completely charmed by his sudden shyness. The maid he healed in particular now sees him as a truly kind person. Later that night, under the light of a full moon, Arthur finds himself in the royal garden, letting out a heavy sigh. He's managed to clear his head, but the grim future detailed in the diary still weighs on him. He frantically searches the pages for any clue, any way to avoid his execution. But a sudden gust of wind rips the pages from his grasp, sending them scattering everywhere. He can only watch in horror as the precious pages land in a nearby fountain. He collapses in defeat, the pages of his future now a soggy, useless mess. A cry of pure frustration echoes through the silent garden. But as he gathers the ruined pages, he notices something strange. The entry detailing Goyoku's embezzlement has completely vanished from the book, and in its place, a new line declares that the future has been slightly altered. He realizes with a jolt that his actions are already rewriting his own fate. But he wonders how this small change could possibly stop the coming revolution, or if he's still destined to meet his end at the guillotine. He screams in frustration, believing such a minor alteration is completely meaningless. And from the pages, a strange, button-eyed figure seems to watch him silently. The strange, button-eyed figure suddenly leaps from the pages. Arthur stumbles back, completely caught off guard by the bizarre creature. It seems to be referencing the very same maid he just healed. A new entry appears, stating that a friend of the maid will oppose his execution. He flips through the diary, certain this new information wasn't there before. The book now lists his good deeds, even assigning him a point for his actions. He realizes that his choices are actively rewriting the future. A new plan begins to form. He'll use his healing magic to win over the people and escape his execution with everything he has. His first step is to appoint the shocked young woman as his personal maid. His sudden declaration leaves the young maid completely stunned. News of his decision quickly spreads throughout the entire estate. The maid is thrown into a panic, certain this new position is a death sentence. The other servants can only whisper that her career is already over. She laments the end of her short and simple life as a maid, and soon she's called before a stern-looking woman who confirms her fears. The woman berates her, demanding to know what's gotten into her. We learn this is Marianne, the head maid, who tells her to get a hold of herself. The young maid can only cry out her name in desperation. But when she explains the situation, Marianne is shocked to learn that Prince Arthur himself made the request. Marianne explains that being appointed by the prince is a sign of great trust, much to the young maid's delight. But her expression quickly sours as she admits that while things started well, she's still confused by his sudden desire to accumulate good deeds. She recalls Arthur explaining his plan, leaving her completely baffled. He reasoned that to win over the commoners, he needed someone easy to talk to. And so, she accepted the role of his personal maid with a hopeful smile. Arthur immediately put his plan into action, healing the injured servants one by one. The maid happily praises him, declaring that he's successfully performed a good deed. But Arthur suddenly realizes that this isn't what he wanted at all. He abruptly turns away, announcing his return to his room and leaving her behind. She recalls how everyone was celebrating, but Arthur's face was filled with sorrow. The thought sends her spiraling into a complete panic. She feels the weight of this new responsibility is simply too much for her to bear. She can't stop thinking about the sad expression she put on his face. And so she comes to a difficult conclusion. She admits to Marianne that she doesn't think she can handle the job. In fact, she has no confidence at all in being his personal maid. Marianne listens to her confession with a stern, unreadable expression, before giving her a sharp poke on the forehead to snap her out of it. The young maid can only look up in surprise, calling out the head maid's name, and then a second poke, just to make sure the message gets through. Marianne explains that she's doing this for both Arthur's sake and for the maid's. She tells the girl that whatever reason the prince had for choosing her is beyond their understanding. But the young maid insists that she still wants to know. She has to understand why Prince Arthur chose her of all people, so she can figure out what he wants and help him achieve it. Her passionate plea leaves the head maid speechless for a moment. Marianne smiles, realizing that the prince carries his own heavy burdens, and perhaps that's why he chose such a straightforward and honest girl. She then reveals that Prince Arthur's own mother was a commoner, perhaps seeing a reflection of her in the young maid. The maid is left completely flustered by the head maid's strange logic. Marianne suggests that she should pamper Arthur, perhaps even like a mother figure. The young maid's mind simply short-circuits from the sheer confusion. Marianne awkwardly explains that some nobles have rather peculiar tastes. She then hands the maid a small bag, telling her to do her best with what's inside. And with that, the head maid departs, leaving the girl to her mysterious task. She opens the bag to find a rather delicate and revealing piece of clothing. Marianne, caught in her strange plan, can only blush and insist it's nothing. But the maid takes the advice to heart, rushing off to pamper the prince as instructed. She finds Arthur in the garden, who simply asks her what's wrong. He's still trying to figure out why the diary isn't updating, while the maid steals her resolve behind him. She suddenly leaps at him, announcing her intention to pamper him like a child. Arthur can only stare in confusion as she shakes a rattle in his face. He's left completely bewildered as she circles him, shaking the toy relentlessly. Overwhelmed by the noise, he finally tells her to be quiet. His sharp tone leaves the maid looking completely dejected. He lets out a sigh, explaining that he just wants to rest for a while, but she immediately offers her lap as a pillow, much to Arthur's shock. She insists that a lap pillow is very relaxing, though he seems less than convinced. He complains that he can't see a thing, even as she comments on the beautiful sky above. He gives up on the lap pillow, asking if she could just make him some tea instead. As he walks away, he casually requests a lot of milk in it. The maid then has a sudden, bizarre, and very loud idea about how to fulfill that request. Her sheer intensity leaves them both collapsed on the grass, completely drained. She tries to explain her strange outburst, but Arthur is just bewildered. He finally announces his retreat to his room, leaving her confused and alone. She can only call out his name as he disappears from sight. She watches him go, realizing he's still just as depressed as before. With a look of grim determination, she decides it's time to use her final resort. And so she peeks into his room, now wearing the special outfit from the head maid. But when she enters, she finds Arthur already fast asleep in his bed. She wonders if this revealing outfit will actually do anything to cheer him up. Realizing how foolish this is, she offers a quiet apology for intruding. But he seems to be in distress, and she calls out his name in concern. A pained sound escapes his lips as he begins to stir from his nightmare. He slowly opens his eyes, recognizing the maid kneeling beside his bed. She gently asks if he was having a bad dream. Arthur can only look away, muttering a quiet apology. She explains that she didn't know what to do after seeing him so upset earlier. So she takes his hand, telling him how happy Marianne and the other maids were with his help. He asks her name and she confirms she's Marianne, the head maid he helped. He admits that in his past life, he never even bothered to learn her name, never seeing her as a person. He explains that all those small acts of ignorance are what led to that terrible future. A future he still doesn't fully understand. She calls out his name, trying to pull him from his dark thoughts. She admits that as a commoner, she can't possibly comprehend the struggles of a prince. But she tells him that if he's in pain, she will always be there for him. She insists that if he has no one else to talk to, he can always talk to her. Her simple, heartfelt offer leaves him completely stunned. He looks away, quietly asking if she truly understands what she's saying. She smiles, admitting that his burden is a difficult thing to comprehend. But if he can't figure it out alone, she offers to think it through with him. Her simple, unwavering support leaves him completely stunned. And for the first time since his return, a genuine laugh escapes his lips. He teases her for being an unreliable maid, and she happily agrees she's just a rookie. He settles back into bed, a sense of peace finally washing over him. She tells him that he just has to learn from now on, asking if he's capable of that. With a newfound determination, he promises that this time, he'll do it right. Her gentle smile is all the encouragement he needs to hear. She begins to cry with relief, overjoyed that she was finally able to make him smile. He gently teases her, pointing out that she's finally smiling too. She muses that being a mother figure is impossible, but perhaps she could be an older sister. The next day, Arthur calls out to her, confirming her name is Marianne. She stops in her tracks, completely stunned that he would remember her name. He explains that this time, he intends to properly learn about every single one of them. He even jokes that she's the cornerstone of his plan to accumulate good deeds. His simple gesture sends the other maids into a state of absolute delight. They immediately swarm him, eagerly asking him to remember their names as well. But the sudden onslaught of attention is far too much for him to handle. He flees to the garden, completely overwhelmed by his newfound popularity. He hides behind a bush, completely flustered by all the attention. He insists he wasn't scared at all as he makes a hasty retreat. Just then, a beautiful woman with a bouquet of roses appears, praising him for his efforts. She notes with a gentle smile that he never truly knew his own staff, and Marianne admits that in truth she never really knew him either. Arthur simply states that they can learn about each other from now on. His straightforward declaration leaves Marianne completely speechless. He gives her a small, almost shy smile. He then turns, admitting it's long overdue, and asks for her name. And with this new understanding, he formally asks her to be his personal maid. With a radiant smile, she accepts the position, and we finally learn her name is Kay, and so begins a new chapter in her life as Prince Arthur's personal maid. But the weight of this new reality seems to hit her all at once. Arthur excitedly explains that every good deed gets recorded in his special diary, and Kay promises that they will face this strange new mission together. He reflects on how nice it feels to be called by his name with such warmth. Even the strange little creatures from the diary seem to approve of this new path. Later, Kay finds him on the floor, surrounded by a long chain of paper airplanes. He cheerfully admits he just wanted an excuse to call out her name again. The paper airplane lands at her feet, a symbol of this strange and unfamiliar connection. But another thought surfaces, a serious-looking woman mentioning his fiancée. Kay, however, is simply overjoyed by Arthur's newfound kindness. Arthur just gives a confident smile, saying this is only natural. She's even impressed that he's now eating onions, a food he used to despise. He happily eats his meal, eager to get out and start helping people. The two of them share a pleasant breakfast in the sunlit room. Kay excitedly explains that his desire to help is a perfect example of noblesse oblige. The phrase makes Arthur choke on his food, completely stunned. She continues to praise his wonderful thinking, oblivious to his sudden distress, because hearing that term reminds him of someone he'd rather forget. Just then, a paper airplane zips past Kay's head, much to her confusion. It smacks Arthur squarely in the face, sending him reeling in surprise. He grabs the folded paper, demanding to know what it is. Kay points out how disrespectful it is, noting that it's covered in writing. When they unfold it, they find a long and vicious list of insults. Arthur looks around in a panic, wondering who would do such a thing as a stern figure walks away. The memory of that woman's voice echoes in his mind, lecturing him about noblesse oblige. He screams in frustration, wanting that person to stay out of his head. And we finally see her face, a noble lady named Morgan Le Fay. Kay greets her with a cheerful smile, completely unaware of the terror on Arthur's face. Morgan leans in close, forcefully inviting him to tea time. He desperately calls out for Kay, trying to escape her grasp. He grabs his maid and makes a run for it, leaving Morgan to watch them go. She simply watches him flee, a thoughtful look on her face. Kay seems to think they'd make a good couple, a thought Morgan immediately rejects. The encounter sends Arthur spiraling back to the day they first met. He remembers her mocking his infamous "let them eat cake" suggestion. She had approached him with a stack of papers, leaving the young prince terrified. She had declared that these were the voices of the common people, and he was horrified to realize they were all letters of complaint and suffering. Morgan just stares back, completely unmoved by his panic. She had warned him that if things continued this way, a revolution was inevitable, and she demanded that he solve the problem immediately. The young Prince Arthur could only tremble in fear. He'd thrown a tantrum, screaming that it was too much to handle. Morgan had simply watched his outburst with utter disdain. She let out a heavy sigh, completely exasperated by his behavior. Her very presence had terrified him back then. She'd called him an ignorant fool, a prince who understood nothing. And back in the present, Kay realizes he's talking about Lady Morgan. Kay asks if he's really that afraid of her, but Arthur can only scream in terror. And Morgan coldly reveals that she is in fact his fiancée. The news sends Arthur flying into the air in a panic. Kay tries to offer her some tea, but Morgan immediately tells her to stop. From behind a pillar, Arthur realizes that Morgan already knows Kay's name. The noble lady turns away, her expression as cold and unyielding as ever. She remembers the state of the kingdom, with commoners starving for even a single bean. And she recalls his infamous suggestion that they should just eat cake instead. She reminds him of that foolish prince holding a blade to his throat to make the point. But she then clarifies that she didn't even come here to see him in the first place. She explains that unlike him, she has important things she must accomplish. And with a final warning that the revolution is imminent, she turns and walks away. Kay can only watch her leave, completely stunned by the encounter. Arthur immediately throws a tantrum, complaining that he's trying his best despite her harsh words. Kay is startled by his sudden outburst, noticing the crumpled paper in his hand. She looks closer at the strange writing, wondering what it could possibly be. Meanwhile, Morgan enters an office where a familiar figure is waiting for her. It's none other than Goyoku, the prince's disgraced former tutor. He immediately starts complaining about how spoiled the prince has become under his watch. But Morgan coldly cuts him off, criticizing his gaudy clothes and the private fortune he's amassed. She declares her intention to fire him and purify the royal family, but Goyoku reveals that he was the one who collected all those complaints from the people. A memory shows her among the starving children, seeing their suffering firsthand. He scoffs at her efforts, telling the young lady not to get ahead of herself. She looks utterly defeated, realizing he can simply destroy all her hard work. He taunts her, saying the royal family's power can easily silence the people's voices. He then asks why she doesn't just break off the engagement if she despises the prince so much. But she screams back that she's different, that she embodies the true spirit of noblesse oblige. He grabs her, sneering that Prince Arthur does absolutely nothing for his people. A stark contrast to the present, where Kay cheerfully drags Arthur along, shouting that very same phrase. Goyoku looks up from the floor in shock, calling out Arthur's name. Just then, Kay bursts in, shielding Arthur and demanding to know why they're interrupting. Arthur steals his resolve, telling himself not to get his hopes up, but knowing he has to act. Morgan, too, seems to find a new determination, believing she's the only one who can fix this. Goyoku immediately points a finger at Morgan, accusing her of trying to have him fired. He claims that she's the one spreading rumors to start a revolution. Morgan can only watch in horror as he twists her efforts into an act of treason. The disgraced tutor plays the victim, crying about how he's being oppressed by her lies. Morgan looks down, completely defeated as her name is called. But from the doorway, Arthur watches the entire scene with a cold, calculating gaze. Morgan simply smiles, saying that's only natural. She points out that she's the one being driven away, not him. She then offers a surprising apology for threatening him earlier, but she dismisses the idea of a revolution as nothing more than a joke. Arthur steps forward, asking if he's really supposed to believe her. He throws her own words back at her, warning that the revolution is still coming. His words seem to hit their mark, and she quietly agrees with him. Goyoku can only stare in confusion, demanding to know what's going on. Kay steps in to shield the prince, telling the tutor to be quiet. Arthur panics, realizing all the people's complaints are being scattered across the floor. He realizes these aren't just complaints, but a way to earn the good deed points he so desperately needs. It finally dawns on him that Morgan was trying to show him the truth all along. A frustrated cry escapes his lips as the realization hits him. Kay tries to comfort him, thinking he's just scared of Morgan's constant talk of revolution. But Arthur sees these letters as evidence, a weapon he can use to fight back. He understands now that these papers are a message directly from his fiancée. Kay is horrified as she reads about disease, starvation, and a desperate plea for education. She realizes with a smile that these weren't insults directed at Arthur after all, but she quickly decides there's no way she can let him see such terrible things. She tries to hide the letters, completely missing the determined look on his face. He finally understands that these letters are the voices of his suffering people, and he realizes that Morgan has been fighting this battle all on her own. That paper airplane wasn't an insult, but a desperate final plea for him to notice. He scrambles to gather the scattered pages, his last hope for survival. Morgan looks down in disbelief, asking if he truly trusts her now. With a confident smile, he decides to face the future that once led to his execution. And with a new sense of purpose, he calls out Morgan's name. He declares that this is true noblesse oblige, and he will save them all. Kay stands guard as Arthur points a finger, not at Goyoku, but at his fiancée. He makes his decision, ready to change the fate that binds them both. Arthur decides he has to see the people's suffering for himself, and to his surprise, Morgan agrees to take him. She explains that her own territory, Avalon, is a refuge for those in need. Kay and Arthur celebrate this new alliance, thanking her for the opportunity. The entire staff seems to be swept up in the prince's newfound purpose, and for the first time, Arthur seems genuinely excited to be a prince. But the memory of his past self's ignorance still haunts him, a voice calling him a fool. Morgan seems to understand his hesitation, her expression softening just a bit. She simply tells him that this time, there will be no running away. And so, with Kay by his side, Arthur begins the long and arduous task of answering his people's pleas. Morgan can only cover her face, completely taken aback by his sudden change of heart. She watches him from a distance, trying to make sense of this new Prince Arthur. As she walks away, she can't help but wonder about the prince's strange behavior. She recalls Kay's naive belief that she had come to help her, and Arthur's sudden confidence, as if he somehow already knew the future. Soon enough, they arrive at the bustling castle town of Avalon. Arthur comments on how lively it all seems, a stark contrast to the letters of suffering. But Morgan can't shake the feeling that something is different about the prince. She turns back, a hint of concern in her eyes as she asks if he's all right. Her mind flashes back to just a few hours earlier, when Kay had been happily chatting about the long carriage ride. Arthur had been quietly reading, trying to prepare for what was to come. But their journey was interrupted by a man with a crossbow, his face twisted in desperation. He screamed at Arthur, accusing him of being a prince who only heals the rich. The crossbow bolt reflected in Arthur's eye as his companions called out in alarm. But Arthur simply stood up, his expression calm and resolute. A sudden flash of light erupts from his hand. The other commoners immediately grab the attacker, scolding him for his recklessness. Arthur can only watch as they drag the man away, a silent observer to their fear. Morgan lets out an exasperated sigh, muttering that he's already caused a scene. He consults his notes, calmly stating that they should arrive by evening. Morgan can't help but comment on how composed he was during the attack. He explains that his healing activates instantly, so he feels the impact, but not the pain. The experience was still jarring, almost as if he knew he was about to be attacked. Morgan announces she's heading on to Avalon, while Arthur tries to play it off as just having good reflexes. But she stops, ordering him to see the town for himself and learn about the commoners' lives. She then walks off into the streets, leaving him to tremble in her wake. Arthur grabs Kay in a panic, wondering if Morgan is finally starting to see him in a new light. The very thought of the two of them getting along brings a hopeful blush to Kay's face. And so, with Morgan as their reluctant guide, they prepare to tour the castle town. A young girl approaches, offering to be his big sister and protect him from scary people. They're surrounded by the simple joys of the town, with children playing nearby. The girl shows him a popular toy, a simple cup and ball game. She explains the mechanics of the game, asking if he wants to give it a try. Eager to connect with them, Arthur cheerfully takes on the challenge. But his first attempt ends with the ball smacking him right in the face. He admits it's more difficult than he expected, much to the girl's surprise. The impact sends him stumbling to the ground as Kay rushes to his side. But as he gets up, he realizes he was never interested in these simple things before. He sees them now not as a faceless mob, but as individuals, each living their own life. He realizes just how different he is from his cheerful, outgoing maid. He turns back to the children, a new understanding dawning on him. For the first time, he truly sees them as individuals, each with their own life. But a sudden, sweet aroma catches his attention, pulling him from his thoughts. The scent leads them to a nearby stall selling freshly baked cookies. He takes one, a small blush appearing on his face as he tries the simple treat. Kay happily chats with the vendor, who mistakes the two of them for siblings. She then enthusiastically offers to buy cookies for everyone there. All the while, Morgan waits by the gate, her expression as cold as ever. Arthur and Kay finally return from their inspection, their arms full of treats. Kay senses the heavy atmosphere, asking Morgan what's on her mind. Morgan turns to Arthur, asking if he's truly here because he wants to save the people. She explains that this place, her territory of Avalon, is where the voices of the suffering are gathered. She demands that Arthur show her his resolve, to prove he's ready for this. He reads through the letters, each one a testament to the people's anger and sorrow. Morgan asks if he has the strength to accept it all. Arthur declares that he'll use his healing ability to solve their problems, and with a sudden burst of confidence, he insists that of course he can do it. But Kay seems to think there are better ways than just casually using his precious magic. She argues that using his authority as a prince would be far more effective. A title card flashes, reminding everyone of his full name and station, Arthur Pendragon. Morgan listens to their exchange, a thoughtful expression on her face. But Arthur suddenly lights up, realizing this is his chance to tackle the kingdom's problems head-on. He starts by pointing out the massive inequality between the commoners and the nobility. Then he brings up the food shortages, specifically the lack of wheat. And finally, he mentions the monopoly on healing magic, which is hoarded by the powerful. He declares that this is exactly why he came to Avalon, to solve every single one of these issues. Morgan seems genuinely impressed, admitting that he's actually thought things through. Kay can only marvel at how much Prince Arthur seems to have grown. But he just laughs, revealing that he's been cheating this whole time by studying his good deeds notebook. Morgan lets out a sigh, deciding to place her trust in him, at least for now. Arthur doesn't seem to care, simply happy that he's finally being taken seriously. And so, Morgan agrees to introduce them to their first official case. But Arthur already has a destination in mind for today's good deed. He cheerfully points toward a nearby orphanage, much to Morgan's annoyance. He's certain this is the perfect day to win over his fiancée and earn some points. He strikes a dramatic pose with a bucket on his head, declaring that he will change his own fate. But his grand speech is immediately interrupted by a crumpled paper ball bouncing off his head. Arthur can only stand there in confusion, the bucket still firmly planted on his head. Suddenly, a second wave of children charges forward, catching Kay completely off guard. They rush past her like a tiny, determined army, and in an instant, the bucket-headed prince is completely swarmed. The scene flashes back to just a few minutes before, as they first arrived at the orphanage. Kay had been worried about the morning's events, but Arthur simply told her not to be. They were greeted by an old man, the head of the orphanage, who was already crying with joy. One of the children explains that Morgan had already told them to expect a visit. From behind a wall, Morgan watches the scene unfold, clearly wanting no part of it. The old man is completely overwhelmed, tears streaming down his face at the sight of the real Prince Arthur. Morgan can only watch, stunned that he would come to such a place. The old man confirms that Prince Arthur is more than welcome here. And so begins the tale of the reborn prince, ready to rewrite his own story. He's amazed that his simple visit could bring them all so much joy. With a grateful heart, he vows that this is where he will change his fate. He tells the children that today, they can do whatever they want to him. And with the bucket now firmly on his head, he awaits their response. But their response is a full-on assault, pelting him with everything they can find. Kay screams his name in terror as the prince is completely overwhelmed by the children. From a distance, the orphanage seems quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos inside. The first blow lands squarely on his head, an apology already in the air. The old man explains that the children are just a bit rowdy, while Morgan wonders if his healing truly negates all pain. But a dark presence seems to loom over the scene, a shadow cast over their innocent game. Kay calls out his name in concern as Arthur continues to apologize from the floor. One of the children steps forward, gently scolding the others for hurting their new friend. Arthur explains that while he's fine, they should be more careful, and the children quickly offer their apologies. The old man is moved to tears, declaring that Prince Arthur is nothing short of a saint. From the sidelines, Morgan scoffs that he's just saying what they want to hear, while Kay looks completely drained. He encourages them to study hard and grow up to be good people, words that seem to strike a chord with Morgan. She remembers saying those exact words herself, wondering why he's suddenly acting so noble. But Morgan's attention is suddenly drawn upward to a boy perched high on the rafters. The old man calls out to the boy, ordering him to come down immediately. One of the children mutters that a blessed prince couldn't possibly understand their struggles. Another adds that for some, trying their best only leads to an early grave. The grim words seem to strike a chord with Arthur as he walks toward the quiet child. He asks if they were the one who spoke of dying despite their best efforts. The child flinches back, quickly denying they said anything at all. But the boy on the beam shouts that it was him, and Arthur calmly asks if he's in pain. He then offers to use his magic to heal whatever is hurting the boy. But the mention of death brings back a chilling memory of the guillotine's blade. The other children whisper among themselves, wondering if healing is even possible for them. Morgan can only lean against the wall, a weary look on her face. The boy introduces himself as Beatty, asking if Arthur is truly serious about helping. He explains that he was attacked by a monster, and a poison spread through his body. Another child scoffs that for the poor, healing magic is just a dream as they wait to die. They argue that it's just their fate, and they'd rather have good food than false hope. Later, Arthur finds the boy from the rafters studying, who asks if Kay is handling the new funds. Arthur looks at his notes and asks why the boy is trying so hard. The boy gets flustered, trying to deny that he's studying for any particular reason. He suddenly screams at Arthur not to touch him, afraid that he might actually be healed. Arthur looks up, confused by the boy's sudden outburst. But then a gentle smile crosses his face as he seems to understand. He approaches the child, a new resolve in his eyes. Kay and the others can only call out his name in surprise. Even Morgan watches with bated breath, wondering what he'll do next. Arthur tells the boy that he understands what it's like to fight desperately against your own fate. He leans in, encouraging the child to keep trying his best, just like him. The boy is left completely speechless by the prince's words. The old man falls to his knees, weeping as he calls it a miracle. And the other children realize that this is the true power of a miracle. Kay and Arthur watch from a distance as the boy finally finds some peace. The other children are stunned, asking if Arthur really used his healing magic on Beatty. But Arthur explains he didn't use his power, just some words he learned from his notebook. Betty quietly admits that he understands how agonizing pain can be, and that's why he couldn't just abandon someone who was trying so hard to live. Arthur looks away, admitting that until now he's been all talk. Morgan points out that he's only ever healed people at the request of other nobles, and this is the first time he's ever done so of his own free will. Her words seem to strike a chord with Arthur as he looks up in thought. He quietly agrees with her, a new understanding dawning on his face. Morgan wonders if this is how he felt when he healed Kay. A rare, gentle smile appears on her face. Arthur can only ask what she means by that. She simply says she'll have to learn from now on, and he agrees. He then playfully tells the children to keep his healing a secret, especially from her. Later that night, Arthur wanders the grounds, unable to find any rest. He checks his diary, seeing a new entry about the orphanage opposing his execution. The memory of Betty's pain still lingers in his mind, and from the shadows, Morgan wonders if he's actually managed to alter his destiny. He knows a prince can't afford to be found sleeping on the side of the road. He can only think of her name as she stands alone in the moonlight. Her expression is unreadable, lost in a sea of quiet contemplation. Arthur tries to play it off, insisting he's used to sleeping outdoors. But he can't hide his flustered state as she looks down at him. She finally speaks, a serious tone in her voice. Morgan explains that she wants to ask him something directly, something she can't ask Kay, and he asks her if she thinks he can truly change his own fate. He immediately panics, shouting that he doesn't understand such things. But his expression softens as he admits that he truly doesn't know. And with a gentle smile, she tells him that he has already changed, something she's seen from watching him all this time. The next morning, Arthur jolts awake with a scream of pure terror. His diary has a new, ominous entry. He's now being watched by Mordred's faction. He throws a tantrum, screaming that despite everything, nothing has truly changed. Days pass under a constant gloomy rain. Kay pleads with him from outside his chambers, begging him to come out. But for 3 days, the prince has locked himself away from the world. He remains hidden under his covers, refusing to face his reality. Overwhelmed by despair, he decides he never wants to go outside again. Because if things continue like this, he knows the guillotine is waiting for him. The diary's words echo in his mind, a warning of a threat he doesn't understand. The strange, button-eyed creature from his diary floats ominously in the air. But Arthur snatches it from the darkness, a desperate look on his face. He collapses to the floor, screaming that his execution is completely unavoidable. From the other side of the door, Kay calls out his name in concern. She finally enters, offering to listen to whatever is troubling him. But she immediately hesitates, wondering if she's overstepping her bounds. Arthur looks up from his diary, surprised by her sudden intrusion. The little creature pops up, suggesting a walk outside to clear his head. But the door slams shut in her face, and she wonders why he's so against the idea. Because Arthur knows this is no joke. If he runs into Mordred, his execution will only happen sooner. He realizes that in this timeline, his execution is only 5 years away. A new plan forms. He'll find a way to avoid his fate at Mordred's hands. Kay watches from the doorway, A look of concern on her face. He suddenly calls out, telling her to summon Mordred to his chambers. A quiet, confident laugh seems to echo through the room. He realizes this was a blind spot. He'll confront Mordred directly. After all his efforts, he decides this is the fastest way to solve his problem. And so Kay leads the way, calling out for the mysterious Mordred. But just as they're about to leave, a soft knock comes from the door. Standing there is the very person who executed him in his past life. He's the third prince, Mordred Pendragon, greeting his older brother with a disarming smile. Arthur can only stare in shock, his reclusive nature completely at odds with this boy's confidence. Mordred jokes that he looks like a prisoner, a comment that sends a chill down Arthur's spine, because he knows that in just 5 years, this boy will be the leader of the revolution. Mordred's expression turns serious, a silent warning that Arthur can't let his guard down. But his face quickly returns to an innocent smile, one Arthur is certain belongs to a future revolutionary. Kay, ever the helpful maid, suddenly has an idea. She politely offers to bring the young prince some tea. But Mordred waves off the formality, insisting they shouldn't just stand in the hall. He then orders Kay to leave them, wanting to speak with his brother alone. Kay quietly agrees and turns to leave the two brothers alone. But Mordred stops her, asking why Arthur is suddenly calling a maid by her name. Arthur explains that he's trying to make a habit of it from now on. To his surprise, Mordred's face lights up, declaring that he thinks that's a wonderful idea. He praises his brother for finally paying attention to the issue of class inequality. He even mentions Arthur's support for the orphanage, calling his big brother amazing for the effort. Arthur is completely disarmed, thinking that with a brother this cute, he might just be able to avoid his execution. Mordred continues, admitting that he had assumed something else entirely. His expression suddenly darkens as he reveals he thought Arthur was just using the nobility for his own ends. He explains that Arthur's monopoly on healing is a privilege that can't be stopped, and that the orphans will never find real work anyway. Arthur screams back, furious at his brother's cynical words. Mordred simply states that the orphans are trying their best, but it's not enough. He then asks with a chilling gaze if Arthur can truly be at ease with that. And with a terrifying smile, he promises to change everything for his brother's sake. The sinister offer leaves Arthur sweating, completely frozen in fear. Later, Kay calls out to Arthur, who has once again locked himself away. He shouts from his bed, completely lost and unsure of what to do. From the other side of the door, she warns that he'll get sick, offering to help. She insists that she doesn't want to just follow orders, but truly understand the reason for his change. But Arthur can only stare at his own power, knowing it's the very thing that binds him to the nobility. He believes that telling Kay about his fears would be completely pointless. So she takes matters into her own hands, physically dragging him from his self-imposed prison. She insists that what he really needs is some sunbathing, despite the gloomy weather. He protests her methods, but she's determined to get him outside no matter what. She even comes prepared with a special parasol, an import designed to keep the rain away. But Arthur's only concern is his precious diary, which he clutches tightly. He panics, screaming at her not to touch him as she gets too close. The two of them stand under the umbrella, a tense and worried silence between them. Kay finally asks about the notebook, noting the serious expression he always wears while reading it. But he coldly tells her it's none of her business, hiding the terrifying things written inside. She looks down, asking if she's just a scary, useless maid to him. But her expression hardens with a sudden, fierce determination. Arthur is completely taken aback, demanding to know what's with that look. He insists that if he's trying his best, she should be praising him for it. He's already come outside, so what more could she possibly want from him? But in a swift motion, Kay snatches the precious diary right out of his hands. He screams in a panic, demanding that she give it back immediately. She holds it away, calling him disrespectful and wondering why he's so angry. The struggle ends with the book smacking her right in the face as he calls her name. She clutches the diary, insisting it's fine if it keeps him from locking himself away again. She explains that she's angry because he's trying to solve everything on his own. He insists it's his problem, but she refuses to accept that answer. Arthur falls to his knees, demanding she explain what she means. With tears in her eyes, she asks what he's trying to say to her. He looks away, admitting that he's uneducated, and that he can't offer any real advice. He knows he's not someone she can rely on. But through her tears, she tries to find the right words. She begs him to stop looking only at the things that scare him. Arthur can only stare back, completely bewildered by her plea. She turns away, admitting that it's strange for her to even try. After all, he's a prince, always fighting battles she can't possibly imagine. She dismisses her own words, calling them an exaggeration. But in her eyes, he's a noble figure facing his struggles head-on, and supporting him is the only right thing to do. She just doesn't want him to suffer, or to be sad for even a moment. Arthur can only stare back, completely taken aback by her sincerity. He finally tells Kay that her wish is simply impossible. With a sad little laugh, she agrees that she knows it can't be done. But even so, she looks at him and admits that she'll keep wishing for it. She clutches the diary, asking if he was surprised by her outburst. She admits that his outburst surprised her, and that's why she got so angry. But Arthur still doesn't understand. He asks why she would get angry or cry over his problems. He admits that he just doesn't get it, and asks her to teach him. Through her tears, she smiles, relieved that he's finally asking for help. She explains that she, Morgan, and all the other maids want to be his strength. A ray of hope finally breaks through the gloomy sky. Because in the end, he was the one who saved her. Her simple, honest answer leaves him completely speechless. And with a small smile, he finally begins to understand. He offers a quiet apology to Kay for pushing her away. He remembers that he already knew how kind she was, even back then. And as the sun finally breaks through the clouds, Arthur suddenly has a new idea. He asks Kay to prepare some tea, inviting her to join him for the first time. He promises to consult with her from now on, no matter how difficult things get. He even admits that he doesn't like seeing her sad, which leaves Kay completely flustered. With a new fire in her eyes, she vows to become a maid he can truly rely on. He happily accepts her offer, the two of them finally on the same page. Kay even has some new sweets prepared, ready to face their future together. She presents a plate of sweets from the head maid, wondering what he must think of her now. But Arthur pulls her close, insisting they eat them right here and now. He explains that all the fresh air has made him hungry, and they both happily take a bite. A rare, peaceful moment shared between the prince and his loyal maid. But their joy is cut short by an overwhelmingly spicy flavor that brings tears to their eyes. Arthur collapses in agony, demanding to know what kind of terrible tart this is. Kay explains it's a recreation of a famous saintess's favorite flavor, leaving Arthur to question the woman's taste. She wonders if his healing ability is somehow connected to the spice, though she knows it makes no sense. They're both left completely defeated on the floor, as another maid looks on in confusion, and Arthur realizes with dawning horror that no amount of healing can fix this terrible taste. But through the pain, Arthur has a sudden, brilliant epiphany, shouting out Kay's name. He believes he's found the solution to all his problems, much to Kay's utter confusion. She asks if this means he's finally ready to go outside again. He declares that they're not just going outside, they're going to a foreign country. Kay reminds him that he was supposed to consult with her first. But Arthur is already rushing off, announcing his plan to meet the saintess. Kay can only call out his name, completely bewildered by his impulsive decision. Later, she explains the true purpose of their sudden journey. Their kingdom's instability is being viewed with great concern by neighboring powers, and so they must win the favor of the holy city before it's too late. Arthur looks out at the vast landscape, announcing their arrival at the holy city of Glastonbury. Kay reminds him that this is the land of the saintess, a place he must impress. She marvels at the idea of a country where many different races coexist. Arthur agrees it's far more diverse than their home, as Kay happily serves tea. He confidently declares that neither the saintess nor the elves will outshine him. Kay proudly states she's done her research, though Arthur seems to dismiss it as a joke. He believes that if he can just demonstrate his power, they'll surely become his allies. Kay listens to his plan with a serious, unreadable expression. But her face breaks into a bright smile as she offers to teach him everything. She explains that the holy city is an autonomous region that acts as a mediator between nations. But Arthur has a question, wondering why this city holds so much power. Kay explains it's because of the saintess, a powerful healer who is dispatched to aid other nations. She looks out over the city, finally understanding the political mechanics at play. Arthur praises her, admitting that she's a truly reliable personal maid. But a hand suddenly snatches the little diary creature from his grasp. A man with a confident smile announces that this is why they were summoned, calling out the name Tristan. A woman with him apologizes, admitting she was distracted by how cute Arthur and Kay were together. The man, now identified as the knight Tristan, agrees that Arthur is cute, but wonders what Kay thinks of him. He declares with a wink that being their guard is more than worth his time. Someone clears their throat, trying to get the conversation back on track. The woman explains that a successful meeting today will ease Prince Arthur's concerns. She continues that this is their chance to forge a new friendship with the holy city. But Arthur knows that beneath this peaceful facade, everything is on the verge of collapse. The political situation is unstable, and public order is rapidly deteriorating. He can feel the flames of the coming revolution drawing ever closer. Tristan can only look on, a hint of confusion on his face. But Arthur declares that an alliance with the holy city is a risk he's willing to take. He looks down for a moment, steeling his resolve for what's to come, and then he announces his true intention, to defeat the Saintess in a one-sided rivalry. Kay is left completely speechless by his sudden and bizarre declaration of war. Kay happily agrees, echoing his bold declaration to defeat the Saintess. They soon arrive at a grand estate, the stage for this crucial meeting. Kay asks if he's eaten properly, concerned about his condition before the talks begin. But Arthur admits he already sampled a local specialty, a grilled bird skewer, a treat that was generously provided by their nightly escort Tristan. He leans in close, asking Kay if she also found the local delicacy to be incredibly spicy. She just laughs, joking that it would be a problem if everything tasted that poisonous. Their casual banter seems to catch the attention of their other escorts, but the familiar taste triggers a memory, and Arthur realizes he's met the Saintess before in his past life. He recalls a cold, silent meeting across a long table, with an ominous shadow looming over him. He remembers that meeting being a complete waste of time, a hollow formality, because when the revolution finally came, the Holy City chose to remain neutral. The memory of his torture resurfaces, a hand yanking his hair back in agony. A guard had mocked him, asking how it felt to experience true pain for the first time. He remembers reaching out, desperately calling for the Saintess to save him. His captors had laughed, telling him to call for a healer, to at least try and save himself. But a woman had scoffed, telling him not to bother calling for help, because a prince who had to beg a foreign Saintess for aid was already a fallen man. But this time, as Kay calls out his name, he refuses to let history repeat itself. An attendant leads them into the room, the stage now set for a very different meeting. He steels his resolve, determined to make things right this time around. A woman with a fan introduces herself as Elaine, the Saintess of the Holy City. The sudden introduction leaves Arthur, Kay, and even Tristan completely stunned. They can only stare back in utter confusion, completely caught off guard. Kay thinks he's just being shy, but Arthur insists that's not what this is. The Saintess then asks if the food she's prepared is to his liking. A single spoonful of a strange, glistening dish is offered to him. Arthur hesitates, a sense of dread washing over him as he prepares to take a bite. He mutters her name, Elaine, as the terrible realization finally dawns on him, and the Saintess looks down, a knowing and almost sinister smile on her face. He realizes with a jolt that in his past life she never wore a mask at all. She suggests that as fellow healers they should try to get along. Kay panics, trying to remind him that this is a delicate diplomatic meeting. But Elaine simply states that he can't take back the fan he just offered her. She then adds that since this is such a rare opportunity, she'd like to see his face. Kay quickly apologizes for his behavior, but Arthur is completely flustered. He demands to know what the Saintess is planning, trying to regain some control. But Kay can only watch in horror as his composure completely shatters. Elaine then reveals a mask of her own, declaring that she already knows his face, and she has absolutely no intention of listening to a single word he has to say. She declares that her healing ability is far superior, demanding he show his face. Arthur shouts back that it's impossible, as Kay tries to hold him back. He insists that his own power is just as strong, a claim she seems to find amusing. The prince completely loses his composure, flailing in a panic. Kay desperately apologizes for his outburst, trying to salvage the disastrous meeting. Even Tristan and the other attendant try to intervene, asking the Saintess to forgive him. They bow their heads in apology as Elaine watches with a smug little smile. The attendants whisper among themselves that the Saintess has been acting strangely lately. A memory surfaces of someone pleading with Elaine, reminding her that she's dealing with royalty. They recall that while she does heal those in need, there's always a hidden condition to her aid. One of the attendants asks what their complaint could possibly be. The other explains that the Saintess simply refuses to speak with them. But Kay suddenly shouts out that she understands completely. She insists that she needs to be useful, and that means talking to the Saintess directly. Arthur points, declaring his superiority and demanding an alliance, but Elaine flatly refuses. Just then, the doors are thrown open with a sudden crash. A flustered man bursts in, apologizing for interrupting their meal. The entire room turns to see the chaotic scene, the meeting now completely derailed. He explains that he rushed here because it's an emergency. A poisonous monster has appeared in a nearby village, and all the residents have been afflicted. The Saintess turns away, acknowledging that she understands the situation. She explains that the poison is so potent, it's even taking down trained knights. The man thanks her with his last breath as she begins her work. Her hands glow with a brilliant light, a sign of her immense healing power. A wave of pure energy washes over the man, purging the poison from his body. He falls into a peaceful sleep, the immediate danger now past. She assures him that he's safe now and tells him to rest. Arthur immediately steps forward, ordering a carriage to be prepared for the afflicted village. But the saintess turns to him with a cold look, calling it a shame. Arthur can only look back in confusion, caught completely off guard by her words. He looks down, her dismissive words echoing in his mind. But the saintess simply states that she will save them all herself. She orders her own carriage to be brought out immediately. After all, this is no time for a dinner party with a foreign prince. With a determined look, she promises that she will be the one to save them. But Arthur and Kay are already one step ahead, rushing toward the village on their own. The saintess can only watch in shock as they race past her. And just as he planned, Arthur arrives at the scene long before she does. But he's met with a horrifying sight. The entire village is already down. He realizes with a chill that nearly everyone has been afflicted by the monster's poison. He takes in the scene, met with the wary eyes of the few villagers still standing. An old man shouts a warning, telling him to stay back for his own safety. But Arthur can already feel the poison in the air, a familiar and deadly presence. He tells them not to worry, because he's here to heal every single one of them. Just then, the saintess arrives on the scene, and the old man calls out her name in relief. She immediately asks for the location of the injured, ready to begin her work. But the man explains that the mysterious boy who arrived just moments before is none other than Prince Arthur, who is already healing the afflicted. He looks back over his shoulder, a smug look on his face as he tells Elaine she's too late, and he declares that he will be the one to treat all the villagers here today. He reaches out, declaring that he will be the one to save them all. Elaine rushes forward, furious at his selfish interference, but as she gets closer, she realizes this poison is unlike anything she's seen before. A villager thanks Arthur, feeling a brief moment of relief from the pain, but the relief is short-lived as the poison's effects return with a vengeance. The villager collapses once more, the poison reinfecting the very spot Arthur just healed. Kay rushes in with a bucket of water, calling out Arthur's name in a panic. The saintess reaches out, her expression grim as she takes control of the situation. Kay supports the weakened saintess, who seems to be struggling against the potent toxin, because they now understand the horrifying truth. This poison is airborne. Elaine explains that while his healing protects him, just being in the same room will infect everyone else. But Arthur simply brushes off her concern, insisting that he's perfectly fine. She screams back that his personal safety is useless if he can't save the villagers. And with a brilliant flash, she unleashes a massive wave of her own healing power. Her magic envelops the entire hut, a desperate attempt to purify the air itself. She turns to Arthur, ordering him to heal the people inside while she holds the poison at bay. With a determined look, Arthur accepts the challenge and rushes into the glowing hut. The onlookers can only stare at the building, wondering what's happening inside. Kay and the old man pray for his safety, their faces etched with worry. But inside, Arthur is thrown backward, screaming as he's overwhelmed by the sheer force of the poison. Sometime later, the villagers gather outside, thanking Arthur for his tireless work. Inside, the old man realizes an entire night has passed and it's already morning. Kay celebrates their success, cheering that they managed to pull it off with the saintess's help. But Arthur collapses, admitting that while their powers may be equal, this was never a competition. He was simply glad that he could save the villagers from their suffering. His selfless words seem to catch the saintess completely off guard. She looks down for a moment, a quiet understanding dawning on her. And with a small smile, she agrees that he's absolutely right. Arthur can only look up in surprise, not expecting her to concede the point. He calls out her name as she turns to leave, a new chapter beginning between the two healers. But Kay suddenly collapses, asking the saintess why she's pushing herself so hard. She tries to rush to Arthur's side, calling out his name in a panic. The old man can only look on in confusion as the saintess watches her fall. Kay admits that her body simply won't move anymore, completely drained. After all, using healing magic takes a massive toll, and she's not used to treating so many people at once. Elaine looks on with a weary sigh as Kay takes up a bed meant for the sick. The old man is moved to tears, never expecting a foreign prince to come to their aid. Elaine firmly states that a poor village like this has no need to offer them any payment, and Arthur chimes in, confirming that he's healing them without any thought of reward. The old man is overjoyed, calling out both their names as Elaine looks on with a new, unreadable expression. Tristan can only watch the chaos unfold with a weary smile. He screams in frustration, lamenting the hardships of serving such a free-spirited master. The knight is completely terrified, realizing the person he was meant to protect is now gone. Arthur and Tristan share a quiet moment of understanding, both just glad to be safe. Tristan gently explains that he understands what it's like to worry about someone. But Arthur can only look on in confusion, still held in Kay's arms. A quiet stillness falls over the room as everyone recovers from the ordeal. Just then, a man with a beret appears, gently telling the Saintess she's done enough. He gives her a reassuring smile, trying to ease her exhaustion, but Elaine can only look up, her expression confirming that she needs to rest. The man with the beret tells Elaine they should prepare to leave once the horses are ready. Kay admits she's never encountered such a potent poison before. Elaine realizes with a shudder that it's a toxin that infects through mere proximity. She reveals the source is a cockatrice, one of the 5 great beasts. The villagers confirm her fears, explaining they have no choice but to try and fight it. Arthur is horrified to learn a single monster can destroy an entire town's economy. Elaine asks if he knows what it is, describing a creature with the head of a chicken. Arthur gets excited at the mention of a chicken, as Tristan offers to hunt it down for him. The villagers can hardly believe that Prince Arthur is truly offering to help them. He then asks if anyone has experience fighting monsters, admitting he's a little anxious. Kay is left completely flustered by his sudden concern. Arthur tries to reassure her, reminding her that it's just a chicken. But he hesitates for a moment, a thoughtful look on his face. He knows she's only worried because she's afraid for his safety. Tristan suddenly chimes in, confidently declaring that he'll be there to protect them. The knight is completely taken aback by their close bond, at a loss for words. But the Saintess has had enough of their bickering. She holds out her hand, a brilliant light beginning to form, and she coldly informs them that she has no need for their help. Her eyes burn with a fierce determination, ready to face the beast alone. She declares that she will solve her country's problems by herself. And with that, she rushes off into the woods as her attendant calls out her name. The man with the beret can only watch her go, a look of weary concern on his face. Tristan complains that the story between the Saintess and Arthur is always so frustrating. Arthur can only look down, offering a quiet apology for all the trouble. But the man with the beret explains that the Elaine of the past was never like this. His mind flashes back 4 years, to a very different time. He remembers a young, hopeful Elaine who dreamed of becoming a pure Saintess. She was inspired by the legend of a holy king, a healer who saved everyone regardless of their station. And she dreamed of becoming a hero just like him, a figure straight out of a fairy tale. But he explains that ideals and reality are often far apart. The title of Saintess was nothing more than a symbol to bolster the church's authority. In the beginning, she had tried to live up to that fairy tale ideal. A mother cried with gratitude, as Elaine simply said she was doing her duty. The woman was just overjoyed that her child had been saved by the Saintess's power, but others saw her kindness as a tool to enhance the church's reputation. The cold, political reality left the young Elaine completely stunned. The child she saved could only offer innocent words of encouragement. But Elaine knew this wasn't right. She just wanted to help people, not serve an agenda. She couldn't even get along with her fellow priests, who saw her as nothing more than a tool. When news of an epidemic in a nearby town arrived, Elaine was ready to rush to their aid. But her companions saw it as an opportunity, whispering that it would be better if more people got sick first. They saw it as a chance to show off their power, leaving Elaine to ask what they were even talking about. The horrifying cynicism of her own people left her completely stunned. Her idealistic spirit was crushed, her expression falling into despair. Her companions could only watch her reaction with casual indifference, and as she walked away into the darkness, she was completely alone. The man with the beret explains that from that day on, Elaine stopped expecting anything from anyone. She realized that the noble, selfless healer from the legends was a fairy tale she could never become in this world. So she decided to become a jester, a clown who would never again hold any hope for the world. The man with the beret finishes his story, finally understanding the reason for her cold facade. Arthur offers a quick apology for his earlier behavior and rushes off after her. Kay can only look on with concern, calling out the Saintess's name. And Arthur realizes just how unsettling it is to live in a world where you can't trust anyone. Kay tries to get his attention, but he simply brushes her off, lost in his own thoughts. He then cheerfully announces their departure to hunt the cockatrice, leaving the villagers completely baffled. Arthur suddenly turns, calling out Kay's name and catching her by surprise. He leans in close, telling her to look forward to his safe return. And with a flustered, tearful smile, she promises that she will. Arthur and Tristan head into the woods, with the prince wondering where they should even begin their search. The knight simply smiles, agreeing that it's a good question. He explains that a monster like the cockatrice often leaves a trail of its prey's remains. Arthur seems to find the idea of a monster mascot amusing, completely missing the danger. But his cheerful mood is cut short as he suddenly trips and goes flying. He tumbles through the air, screaming for Tristan to do his job and protect him. As he lands, he finds a tattered piece of cloth, telling himself not to just throw it away. But as he looks closer, his expression shifts to one of pure shock. He recognizes the fabric, realizing with dawning horror that it belongs to someone he knows. His mind flashes to the face of a serious-looking elf woman, her fate now uncertain. He takes off in a sprint, ignoring the calls from behind him. A bead of sweat rolls down his face as he pushes forward, screaming out the Saintess's name as he rushes to her side. And he finds her lying on the ground, the victim of a cockatrice attack. He can't understand why she would do something so reckless all on her own. Tristan and the man with the beret rush in, confirming she's only unconscious. The sudden movement catches Tristan completely by surprise. The knight can only stare, startled by the prince's sudden outburst. The injured elf woman slowly opens her eyes, whispering the Saintess's name, and the man with the beret explains that Elaine went off to fight the beast all by herself. The man explains that she ordered them to return to the village, leaving her to face the beast alone. A memory shows her cold refusal, insisting that she didn't need their help. Her companions had pleaded with her, calling out her name in desperation. But Arthur shouts that he will be the one to defeat the cockatrice, taking the burden for himself. The man with the beret recalls the elf woman explaining that this was the very reason they came. She had asked to accompany the Saintess no matter the danger. Arthur then turns to Elaine, asking if she's ever even seen a cockatrice before. He admits he's only seen monsters as taxidermy, as she walks off telling him to be quiet. She glares back over her shoulder, demanding his silence. But Arthur just smiles, pointing out that if they're too loud, the monster might just appear. Tristan asks if Arthur is suddenly concerned about the Saintess. He points out how rare it is for the prince to care so much about another person. Arthur admits that for some reason, he just can't leave Elaine to fend for herself. Tristan's mind immediately leaps to romance, much to Elaine's visible disgust. But Arthur is still trying to figure it out, insisting he doesn't actually want to help her. And then a sudden realization finally clicks into place. He cheerfully explains that he also read the picture book about the Holy King. His words seem to strike a nerve, and Elaine looks back with a tense expression. She suddenly grabs him, her eyes wide with a fierce, unspoken emotion. Arthur can only look back in surprise, asking if he said something to startle her. She scoffs, claiming that it wouldn't hurt her anyway. The man with the beret realizes she's the one who was just speaking about him. Arthur admits that he doesn't believe everything in that story. He says she's given up on becoming the Holy King and on trusting other people. But he points out that she hasn't given up on saving them, and that deep down she still wants to be just like that legendary hero. Elaine seems to understand, accusing him of sympathizing with her as some kind of hobby. Both Arthur and Tristan can only watch her strange reaction. She dismisses his words, saying that's all there is to it. But Tristan steps in, insisting it's not sympathy as he leads Arthur forward. Tristan tells Elaine that as a proud saintess, she should just go home. He explains that they can't just abandon a foreign dignitary in the woods. The elf woman can only look on, a bead of sweat on her brow. But Elaine shouts back that she doesn't need their help. She screams at them to give up on her country's problems and leave her alone. But her outburst is cut short by the sudden appearance of the cockatrice. Tristan immediately shoves Arthur out of the path of its attack. The elf woman readies her weapon, realizing this is the legendary beast. Arthur can only stare up in shock, admitting it's much bigger than he imagined. He frantically calls out to Tristan, asking what their next move should be. Arthur panics, shouting that they can't possibly fight in such a narrow space. Tristan agrees, telling everyone to fall back to a more open area. But Elaine shouts back that they don't have time for a strategic retreat. Tristan ignores her, pointing toward a clearing where they can properly intercept the beast. But their escape is cut short as Arthur screams that they've run into a dead end. The cockatrice suddenly soars right past them, completely ignoring the group. Arthur is left completely baffled as the elf woman notices the sound of running water. Tristan realizes the horrifying truth. The cockatrice is a poisonous bird heading for the river. He explains that by the water's edge, it can turn the entire area into a toxic swamp. And in the poisoned water, the beast becomes a true harbinger of pestilence. The elf woman takes aim, letting an arrow fly straight and true. But it dissolves mid-air, consumed by the beast's toxic aura. The man with the beret confirms that the poison is simply too corrosive for their attacks to land. The elf woman warns that the cockatrice is a cowardly creature, and this will likely be a long, drawn-out battle. She then turns to Arthur, telling him that she will handle this and he should return to his own country. But a boot suddenly splashes into the poisoned water, as Arthur charges forward, ignoring everyone's warnings. The cockatrice can only look on in confusion at the strange human. Arthur cheerfully announces that he's entering the beast's so-called safe zone. He runs directly toward the monster, a confident and almost reckless smile on his face. The poison immediately begins to seep into his body, a corrosive toxin that would fell any normal person. But just as quickly, his healing magic activates, purging the poison from his system in a flash of light. He's repeating this cycle at an incredible speed, a being the monster simply can't comprehend. The cockatrice can only look on in confusion, its greatest weapon now completely useless. And with the poison neutralized, Arthur reaches out and easily captures the now harmless beast, a triumphant smile on his face. The man with the beret can only watch in awe, begging him to continue purifying the area. And Elaine looks on, completely stunned by this unbelievable turn of events. The cockatrice is now completely subdued, its strength fading. But Elaine realizes that as long as the poisoned water remains, the beast can still draw power from it. Tristan worries that Arthur will tire out long before the monster does. The elf woman steps forward, offering to provide support in any way she can. And Arthur's words echo in Elaine's mind, reminding her that she never truly gave up on saving people. Tristan steels his resolve, ready to protect the prince at all costs. Arthur looks back, asking if they can purify the spring's poison. And with a new determination, Elaine unleashes her own healing magic. The beast lets out a final, desperate cry as Arthur holds it firm. He looks back with a radiant smile, thanking the Saintess for her help. Arthur can only let out a sound of confusion. The beast thrashes in its final moments, sending him flying through the air. Tristan watches in amazement as the poisoned liquid turns back into pure water. Elaine is completely exhausted, but the threat has finally been neutralized. Arthur rushes back to her side, a radiant smile on his face as he thanks her for her help. She looks away, flustered, admitting she only did it because he was there to assist. But she suddenly shoves her staff right in his face, catching him completely off guard. Her eyes are wide with a fierce, almost panicked expression. Arthur can only stare back, completely bewildered by her sudden change in mood. And a chilling vision of the guillotine flashes before his eyes, a reminder of the fate he's fighting to avoid. Arthur is completely stunned by her sudden aggression. The man with the beret worries that this is too much for the Saintess to handle. She looks away, demanding to know what he could possibly understand about her. She screams at him, asking what's wrong with him, what he's even trying to do. She accuses him of just spouting pretty words while relying on his servants for everything. She demands to know what a sheltered prince could possibly know about her suffering. Her attendant can only watch, noting how unusually agitated the Saintess has become. Elaine looks down, muttering that it's better not to provoke her any further. But Arthur just looks back calmly, telling her that he understands. He grabs her hand, his voice filled with a new conviction as he insists that he truly does understand. His words send a shockwave through her, her eyes widening in disbelief. She suddenly grabs him by the collar, her composure completely gone. He's shaken violently, her rage finally boiling over. A memory surfaces of a younger her, holding the hand of a small, familiar-looking boy. Arthur pleads with her to stop, completely overwhelmed by her sudden outburst. She demands to know what he could possibly mean by trying to heal her. He looks down, explaining that he's not just pitying her, but asking her to listen. The memory continues, the young boy's words echoing in her mind. Arthur looks up with a pained expression, telling her that she is just like him, and he warns that if she continues down this path, she'll be left all alone with no one to save her. She screams at him not to act like he understands her experiences. She insists that she can handle this all by herself, and that she doesn't need help from anyone. But the cockatrice suddenly lunges forward, catching them all by surprise. Elaine screams at him to get out of the way, but the elf woman shoves him to safety, taking the blow herself. The impact sends her reeling backward, and she collapses to the ground under the beast's shadow. Arthur rushes to her side, but she insists that she doesn't need anyone's help, because deep down she's just terrified of being hurt. Arthur explains that while he can heal any physical wound, the pain of having no one to rely on is a different kind of agony. And through her tears, Elaine finally admits that she knows that pain all too well. With the cockatrice finally defeated, Tristan can only let out a weary sigh. The elf woman tells Arthur that it's rude to intrude on such a private moment. And with the battle finally over, the village's fears are put to rest, their cheers echoing through the forest. The man with the beret and the elf woman share a quiet look of relief. Kay worries over Tristan's tattered clothes, but he just laughs it off as poison damage. The elf woman smiles, insisting that she's perfectly fine, much to Arthur's relief. By solving the Saintess's troubles and defeating the cockatrice, he's managed to normalize their relations. And his diary confirms the massive shift, awarding him a total of 20 points. A new entry states that many people, led by the Saintess herself, will now oppose his execution. Elaine seems to agree, insisting that they should keep in contact from now on. Later, Arthur and Kay find themselves sampling some cockatrice skewers, a special recipe from Elaine. She asks if this is what he meant by an alliance, but he can only complain about how spicy it is. He tells her to just speak informally, a sign of their newfound friendship. The elf woman seems a bit overwhelmed by the sudden change in atmosphere, but soon enough, they all seem to reach a happy understanding. And as their carriage departs, Elaine waves them off with a genuine smile. Arthur waves from the carriage, thanking Tristan as they prepare to part ways. The knight just smiles, admitting that the mission's success was all thanks to him. A messenger rides off, promising to report any new developments with the Saintess. Back inside, Kay smiles, noting that he's managed to gain yet another ally. According to his diary, he's now avoided not just the execution, but life imprisonment as well. And with a newfound confidence, he declares that while death is certain, his own fate can be changed. But their quiet moment is interrupted by a crowd of curious onlookers. They're immediately swarmed by people, all hailing him as the hero who defeated the cockatrice. Kay tries to shield him from the crowd, wondering if they're reporters. A man with glasses steps forward, introducing himself as Jean and eagerly asking to hear their story. Jean holds up a newspaper, explaining that this particular story is already drawing a lot of attention. It features the face of a grim-looking man, his expression heavy with despair. The reporter explains that this man is a criminal, now scheduled for a public execution, and Arthur recognizes him instantly as the desperate man who attacked him on the road to Avalon. Jean confirms that the execution is set for the following week, a grim end for the would-be assassin. Another onlooker adds that a huge crowd will surely gather to watch the spectacle. Arthur looks down at his diary, his mind flashing back to the man who tried to end his life. But instead of anger, a brilliant and unexpected idea suddenly clicks into place. He sees this not as an execution, but as a perfect opportunity to earn a massive amount of good deed points. And so, he turns to the reporters and declares that he officially forgives his attacker. The reporter is left completely speechless by the prince's sudden declaration. With a confident smile, Arthur announces that the public execution is officially cancelled. His words leave both Jean and Kay completely dumbfounded. The crowd immediately erupts in protest, questioning how he could possibly forgive a criminal. But Arthur explains that he now understands the people are individuals, unlike the selfish nobility. He knows the man was only acting out of desperation, fighting to protect his own life, and that the attack was a direct result of the suffering inflicted by the royal family. His diary warns that without the spectacle of punishment, the people will have no outlet for their anger. But Arthur is determined to change that very cycle of despair. His magnanimous words completely win over the reporter, who eagerly asks to put the story on the front page. But the reporter can only stammer, completely baffled by the prince's cheerful declaration. Arthur doesn't understand the problem, asking why it's so difficult when he's the one offering forgiveness. A man in the crowd explains that while Arthur is the victim, the execution is now a matter of state. He continues that this is the only way for the criminal, a man named Louvain, to find peace. Arthur quietly repeats the name, a thoughtful and calculating look on his face. He's pulled from his thoughts as Kay calls out his name from behind him. She tells him that if he's truly decided, she will do everything in her power to help him. With a new fire in his eyes, Arthur vows that this time he will absolutely escape his own execution. And so, he declares his new mission to stop the execution, with Kay promising to help him think of a plan. A quiet moment passes as they both contemplate the difficult task ahead. Arthur admits he has no idea how to proceed, asking Kay if she's thought of anything. But his loyal maid suddenly collapses, overcome with a sudden fever. The long journey and recent stress have finally taken their toll on her. Arthur gently tells her to rest, assuring her that her fever has broken. The head maid, Marianne, explains that Kay is likely just exhausted from their travels. With his primary advisor out of commission, Arthur agrees they'll need to ask someone else for help. He runs through his list of allies, but none of them seem quite right for this delicate situation. But then a brilliant idea strikes him, and he knows exactly who to call. Marianne seems thrilled that he's found a solution so quickly, and so he summons his chosen ally to a grand estate, ready to ask for their help. And his chosen ally is none other than the first prince, Rod Pendragon. A stern-looking maid stands beside him, her expression unreadable. A memory flashes back to a younger Arthur, happily calling out his brother's name. But Rod had grabbed him by the shoulders, shaking him with a surprising amount of force. He'd accused Arthur of trying to steal the throne just because he had healing powers. Arthur had tried to deny it, leaving his brother completely flustered. The maid had pointed out that Arthur had more supporters, telling Rod not to worry since he was the eldest son. But Arthur had simply smiled, declaring that his big brother was someone to be proud of. Back in the present, Arthur sips his tea, happy that Rod came so quickly when he called. Rod sips his tea with a smug grin, his maid thinking he's such a kind older brother. But his words are far from gentle, assuming Arthur is depressed because his supporters have dwindled. He even laughs about how Arthur was thrown into prison, calling him a fool. His maid looks on disapprovingly, thinking that a man who can't control his own people is unfit to be king. Arthur, however, seems impressed, agreeing that he's not king material, and that's why he was executed. He cheerfully tells Rod that he's perfectly captured his true nature, much to his brother's disgust. But his expression turns serious, warning Rod that if things continue, he'll be the one facing execution, and that makes Arthur sad. He then turns to Rod's maid, asking if there's anything he can do to help his brother, and she offers him some sweets. Arthur accepts with a slightly flustered thank you as Rod watches the strange exchange. The maid looks on with a stoic expression, identified only as maid number 15. Arthur cheerfully suggests that Rod should start calling his servants by their names, a concept his brother can't seem to grasp. The maid thinks about how everyone is human and how Goyoku's betrayal in her past life is a lesson that betrayal from a subordinate can lead directly to death. Arthur gives a satisfied smile, his point seemingly made. The strange exchange leaves both Rod and his maid completely flustered. Rod then shouts, asking if Arthur's own personal maid ran off just because she had a fever. He laughs, declaring, this is proof that Arthur is neglecting his own staff. He warns his brother not to get complacent just because he has healing magic. The cat-eared maid thinks to herself that Arthur will eventually be compared to the Saintess and be brought to tears. The mention of the Saintess, Elaine, seems to strike a nerve with Rod. The maid points out that Arthur has befriended the Saintess, asking if Rod is crying about it. Arthur suddenly appears, calling out his brother's name as Rod seethes in anger. He leans in close, urgently asking how he can stop the upcoming execution. Arthur explains that he came to Rod specifically because of his vast knowledge. He looks on with a hopeful expression, waiting for his brother's guidance. But Rod is furious, demanding to know why he wants to save the very man who tried to kill him. Arthur and the maid can only watch in surprise as he asks what's gotten into his brother. He tries to explain that since Rod is an expert in politics, he might know a way to solve this. Rod just scoffs at the idea that brothers are supposed to help each other out. He dismisses the entire notion as completely ridiculous. Arthur calmly reminds him that they are, after all, rivals for the throne. But Rod insists that a true brother has no need to listen to the voices of commoners. Arthur's expression turns cunning, thinking that if Rod rebels, he'll just have him thrown in prison. He grabs his brother's hand with a sudden burst of gratitude, leaving Rod completely flustered. And with that, Arthur makes a hasty retreat, leaving his brother behind. Rod can only shout after him, furious at his younger brother's strange behavior. The sudden turn of events leaves both of them completely baffled, because Arthur knows that betrayal from a subordinate is a direct path to the grave. Just then, the maid calls out Rod's name, a serious look on her face. She reveals that the love letter he sent to Saintess Elaine was returned unopened. He arrives at Louvain's village, overhearing the locals blame the condemned man for their troubles. He's reminded of his own words, that brothers are meant to help each other. He approaches the children, who seem to be arguing about the royal family. He thinks about Louvain, a man condemned by the state despite the quiet opposition of a few. And he knows he needs to find those who are willing to fight against this injustice. He walks through the desolate village, the people questioning if a noble would ever truly help them. But Arthur stands before them, announcing that he has already forgiven the man who attacked him. He believes that if enough people speak out, they can overturn the execution. It's all part of his plan to rally support and get close to the condemned man. His words begin to stir the crowd, planting the first seeds of dissent. He forms a wild plan to save the man with healing magic at the very moment of execution. With a confident smile, he tries to rally the villagers to his side. He imagines himself reaching out to Louvain, a lone figure against the state. But the weight of it all crushes him, haunted by visions of failure and the people's grief. Just then, a familiar and imposing figure arrives at the estate. It's none other than his fiancée, Morgan Le Fay. She's been told that Arthur has once again locked himself away in his room. News has already spread that the prince is opposing the public execution. Morgan knows it's unusual for the reclusive prince to take such a public stand, and despite her usual coldness, she seems to have a reason for seeking him out. She knows that deep down Arthur must be hurting, and finds his struggle almost pitiful. She remembers Kay trying to comfort him, telling him not to be so down. The memory seems to strike a chord with her, a flicker of concern in her eyes. because she knows just how much pain he's truly in. And with a new resolve, she turns to face the headmaid. Marianne explains that she's relieved because on the day of the execution, there were protests against it. She's just glad that Arthur didn't have to go to that place and see it for himself. But from his room, Arthur insists that it's all his fault. Morgan calls out his name, trying to get through the closed door. She tells him that what happened was no mere childish prank. She tells him that he is not the one at fault. But Arthur turns away, and Kay can only watch in helpless concern. He's completely consumed by the darkness of his own guilt. Through his tears, he insists that he was the child who interfered with the execution. He remembers the children's desperate hope, believing their protest could save their brother. And he recalls Morgan arriving at the scene just as things were about to turn violent. She had offered her help, ready to join their cause. But the protest had escalated, with the children shouting Arthur's words of forgiveness. A young girl had fallen amidst the chaos, her brother crying out in fear. The crowd's attention had been diverted by a sudden violent turn of events. A sudden crack echoes through the square, a sound of breaking wood. A man with a bottle shouts that now is their chance to act. The children can only watch in wide-eyed terror as the plan unfolds. Morgan grits her teeth, watching the situation spiral out of control. He remembers his wild plan to use the chaos as a distraction, but he was too late to stop the execution from being carried out. She had believed everything was going according to plan, never expecting failure. The guards are completely caught off guard by the sudden uprising. The children scream for their brother as the guards try to regain control, and in the face of that chaos, Arthur admits that he simply ran away. Morgan calls out his name from the other side of the door. She reminds him of his own promise to do this for the people. He remembers Kay trying to comfort him, promising to keep his pain a secret, and Morgan's expression softens with a hint of understanding. Her words finally get through, and Arthur opens the door. He can only call out her name in surprise. He's stunned that she would come all this way just for him. She turns to face him, ready to say what's on her mind, and she tells him that if he has something he wants to do, he can rely on her too. Her unexpected offer leaves even Kay completely touched. Kay explains that he saved her, and she's seen how hard he's been trying. Arthur's face lights up with a smile, realizing that's what Morgan was thinking all along. His sudden realization leaves his fiancée completely flustered. He teases her, admitting he thought she hated him this entire time. Morgan looks away, muttering that she doesn't particularly hate him now. But Arthur points, admitting that he's still a little bit scared of her. A voice cuts in, telling him that's only because he's a fool. He immediately calls out for Kay to save him, even as she calls his name. A quiet, almost defeated laugh seems to fill the air. Arthur turns back with a smile, asking if she really thought he was crying. He announces he's just grabbing a coat and walks away, leaving Morgan to watch. Kay is just relieved to see Prince Arthur back on his feet again. But Morgan's expression remains thoughtful and unreadable. She turns to Kay, admitting that the maid has had a difficult time because of him. The comment seems to catch Kay completely off guard. She can only call out Morgan's name, flustered by the sudden attention. Morgan recalls how Arthur would always run to the garden to cry whenever she scolded him as a child. She admits that while she can't do anything for him, she still finds his situation tragic. And as she walks away into the darkness, Kay calls out her name, because Arthur's half-baked plan only gave Leuven's siblings false hope before it all came crashing down. He collapses in the garden, whispering apologies to no one. The weight of his failure is too much to bear, and he can only cry out that he's sorry. He believes that even his magical diary can't fix the person he is, and the book confirms his fears, refusing to show him the next task. He thinks of how Kay and Morgan have changed because of him, while he remains the same selfish boy who failed because he only wanted to save himself. The creature from the diary suddenly reaches out, telling Kay to stay back. It tells him that if he's going to give up on this timeline, he should just take the diary and self-destruct. The creature holds out the book, a final and terrible offer. And as he falls into darkness, Arthur reaches out to accept his fate. Later that night, Kay notes the cold air as she prepares to draw the curtains. She watches over Arthur as he rests, and he offers a quiet word of thanks. He lies in silence for a moment, his eyes closed. Then he asks Kay if he can see her face one more time. She peeks over the covers, calling out his name with a gentle smile, and she promises that she will always be by his side. Arthur can only think that she's being a bit dramatic. He later wanders the grounds alone, reflecting on the misconception that he's somehow immortal. The diary's creature reminds him of all the ways he could die: starvation, being crushed, or decapitation. And with that grim thought, a new chapter begins. He stands at the edge of a dark pond, the feeling of drowning overwhelming him. Clutching the diary, his face is a mask of quiet despair. He notes with a grim sense of relief that the water isn't frozen over. He's decided to give up on this world to stop fighting his fate. And with a final decisive step, he enters the cold water. The icy chill immediately surrounds him as he sinks into the darkness. The diary floats away from him, a crack forming in the still surface. He knows that the center of the pond should be deep enough to end it all, but his own healing magic activates against his will, a soft glow in the dark. And he realizes that even with his power, the cold and the pain are still very real. He can almost hear Kay's voice, asking if he understands just how cold it is. He sinks deeper into the darkness, his resolve hardening. But a single thought cuts through the despair, telling him no, because he knows that if Kay were here, she would rush in without hesitation, angry and crying as she held him close. He thinks of Morgan, who would look at him not with disdain, but with genuine worry. He remembers Marianne and the other maids who would surely be angry with him for this. He even thinks of Elaine, Tristan, and the children from the orphanage. The faces of everyone he's met, everyone he's helped, flood his mind. And he cries, realizing he's finally learned all their names only to throw it all away. He lets himself sink into the cold, dark water. The diary's creature offers him a choice. Take the book and start over. He gives a sad smile, wondering if he can really do it all again. Because if he can't change, he'll just be repeating the same failures. He closes his eyes, completely lost and unsure of what to do anymore. He can only wonder what he should have done differently. A heavy silence falls over the pond under the starry sky. But a small splash breaks the stillness of the night. A hand suddenly breaks through the surface of the water, and Arthur finds himself lying on the ground, soaking wet and completely bewildered. He gasps for air, coughing up the cold water from the pond. Looking around in a daze, he can't understand what just happened. His vision fades to black, the world dissolving around him, and a memory surfaces of a snowy night, with his younger brother Mordred looking down at him. A voice calls out that name, and Arthur's eyes widen in shock. The young Mordred from his memory just smiles, commenting on how late they're staying up. He remembers the diary's final offer, to give up on this world and start over. He remembers jumping into the pond, certain this was the end. So he can only cry out in confusion, asking why he's still here. Because as he lies on the cold ground, he realizes with dawning horror that time hasn't been reversed at all. Arthur can only wonder why his attempt failed, as a voice comments on how late he's staying up. His younger brother leans in close, asking what he's muttering about. And Arthur can only whisper the name of the boy who will one day execute him. Mordred. Mordred just laughs, admitting that he was surprised to find him out here. He explains that he just returned from a meeting with his supporters, only to find his older brother sleeping on the cold ground. Arthur can't understand why he had to run into him now of all times, to meet the very person who killed him in the previous timeline. The boy who seems so innocent yet holds his future in his hands. Mordred simply warns him that he'll catch a cold if he stays out here in the snow. Mordred just laughs, teasing that his brother must be sick. The comment sends a fresh wave of terror through Arthur. His younger brother dismisses it as just playing around, calling him helpless. He then reaches out a hand, telling Arthur he can't stay out in the cold. The simple gesture leaves Arthur completely flustered and at a loss for words. Mordred seems to brush off his strange reaction, deciding it's not important. But his eyes land on the magical diary and he asks what it is. Arthur shouts at him not to touch it, insisting there's nothing written inside. Mordred scoffs at the idea of a blank diary, as Arthur insists it's not what it looks like. But his brother just gives a sly smile, as if he knows exactly what's going on. Mordred cheerfully points out that Arthur failed to save Leuven, asking if he's learned his lesson. Arthur can only ask if his brother knew about his plan all along, and Mordred confirms that he knows exactly why the rescue attempt failed. He then asks with a chilling smile if his big brother wants to know the reason. Arthur can't comprehend it, wondering why his brother would be so cruel. Mordred leans in, mockingly reminding him that brothers are supposed to help each other. The taunt sends Arthur into a rage, and he lunges forward, screaming his brother's name. But Mordred easily shoves him away, sending him tumbling down the snowy hill. Arthur lands hard in the snow, the impact knocking the wind out of him. He can only look up in despair, completely broken by his brother's cruelty. And with a cruel smile, Mordred reveals the simple reason for his failure. A memory surfaces of Arthur healing him as a child, his brother explaining that he failed because he's just too kind. He remembers a younger Arthur, who had just thanked him for the healing. But even then, Mordred had called him a fool for his selfless act. The memory sends Arthur into a rage, screaming that his brother is the one who's a fool. Mordred calmly states that no matter how hard Arthur tries, he can't change a thing. He then leans in, a cold and calculating look in his eyes. He mocks Arthur for only now realizing that saving everyone is impossible and that each commoner is an individual. He offers the diary back, telling his brother there's no need to give up just yet, but Arthur slaps the book away, screaming at him to be quiet. He screams at his brother to be quiet, refusing to listen to any more of his taunts. But Mordred calmly points out that Arthur is the one who's mistaken about being saved. He remembers everyone who taught him about pain, about trying his best, and that's why he's determined to save them all, so he can be saved in return. The raw emotion of it all brings him to tears, a desperate cry escaping his lips. But Mordred just laughs, mocking his brother for being so childish. He promises that he won't let Arthur get his way, a final chilling threat. And so Arthur walks away, vowing to study, to learn, and to redo this world one more time. A new day dawns over the castle, a symbol of his renewed fight, and the first person he calls for is his fiancée, Morgan. Morgan listens, a hint of weariness on her face. He tells her directly that he has a favor to ask. He wants to learn practical politics, to create a fair world for both nobles and commoners, and he insists that she's the only one he can possibly ask for such a thing. His new resolve begins to ripple outwards, changing the world in small ways. Out in the fields, a group of children work tirelessly under the hot sun. A man on horseback approaches, identifying them as the siblings of the executed Louvain. He explains that because their guardian became a criminal, their future was left uncertain. But then he delivers some unexpected news. Starting next month, they will receive a subsidy from the state. Back in his study, a tutor asks Arthur if this new ordinance was his idea and why he kept his involvement a secret. He explains that he doesn't want their gratitude because they don't know the real him. The tutor can only look on in surprise as Arthur gives a knowing smile. With that settled, he calmly announces that it's time for their lesson to begin. He knows this small act won't earn him forgiveness, but it's the best he can do for now, until a voice suddenly calls out his name. A group of children bursts in, excitedly announcing that it's time for a break. It's Betty and the others from the orphanage, grateful that Morgan arranged for them to join his lessons. Another boy, Yisu, complains that studying is too hard, unlike the book-loving Beatty. Arthur just sips his tea, annoyed that Yisu isn't even trying. The tutor then poses a question to the class, asking what they believe is the kingdom's greatest problem. And Arthur leans forward, quietly agreeing with the question. Yisu struggles with the text, unable to make sense of the words. But Beatty offers a surprisingly profound answer, that the common people are all individuals. Arthur elaborates, explaining that the nobles' monopoly on wheat will inevitably lead to an uprising. Yisu immediately accuses him of treason, horrified by his words against the nobility. But Arthur calmly explains he's just reviewing the failures of his past life, a lesson he's learned the hard way. The lesson continues, with Yisu still struggling to keep up with the reading. Betty, however, proudly shows Arthur that he's already finished his book. He then points to another, declaring his goal to make the founding festival a success, but Arthur realizes with a jolt that it's his magical diary. The diary slips from Beatty's grasp as he realizes it's not a normal textbook. Arthur quickly retrieves it, apologizing as he notices a new entry has appeared on its pages. He wonders how this is possible, certain that only he could see the diary's text. He looks closer, noticing the letters aren't even glowing like they usually do. The horrifying realization hits him. Someone else has written in his magical diary,